The following presentation will be presented by Brian Kling from CLEAN-FLO International, which was held on February 23rd, 2017 at the Kidder Township Building.
I'm an engineer, I'm a professional engineer. Everything that we do is driven by engineering principles. So our technology has been tested numerous times. We got multiple reports from around the country, around the world. We do work throughout Asia, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, down into South America, Mexico, a lot of work in Canada right now. So you'll see some of those examples as we walk through this. So this is eutrophication is a term which basically the definition of eutrophication is that water bodies decay over time and they become loaded with nutrients, phosphates and nitrates that ultimately promote algae growth. And that's usually the first step. And the more and more algae growth that gets promoted, the more you start to suck oxygen out of the bottom of the lake, and the more muck starts to build over time. That muck is a dense composite of nutrients, all different types of nutrients. And that's what ultimately triggers the death of a water body. Basically, if you didn't do anything to the lake, and probably not during your lifetime, but ultimately the lake would turn into a wetland. So if you see wetlands today, they weren't constructed wetlands. 100 years ago, they were probably a pond or a stream or something like that that ultimately got taken over through eutrophication. EPA's website talks about nutrient pollution as being one of America's most widespread, costly, and challenging environmental problems. The problems in the Chesapeake Bay are all caused by nutrient loading coming through the Susquehanna. The Susquehanna has problems of its own. It used to be a world-class bass fishery down through the southern part of the Susquehanna. I used to fish it every Saturday and Sunday as a kid. The bass now have endocrine disruptors so that the bass aren't actually breeding anymore in the Susquehanna. And it's all a result of nutrient pollution and eutrophication. Herbicides, pesticides may exacerbate the problem. So a lot of people will go out and they'll see weeds, algae, and they'll immediately start putting copper in, other compounds, reward, trying to kill the plants. The problem is that every plant you kill goes to the bottom and ultimately in the decay process uses up oxygen. And what happens is if you went out on the lake during the summer in the middle of July, for instance, and you dropped a dissolved oxygen probe down through the water column, what you would see is that oxygen levels are high at the surface where you get wind and wave action. And as you drop that probe down through the water column, oxygen levels start to drop. Closer you get to the bottom, many times we see zero oxygen at the bottom, meaning that those sediments are totally anaerobic. If you pull them up by hand, you would smell hydrogen sulfide. There's methane in those. That muck, those sediments, those muck sediments as well. And ultimately in that, what we call almost like a compost, which could also include leaking septic tanks and the like, ultimately in there's all kinds of other adverse effects to water quality. And we talked about endocrine disruption. We did a project down in Lake Apopka in Florida. It's a 30,000 acre lake. They asked us to do a 250-acre pilot area. While we were there, we learned that the alligators in Lake Apopka have been affected with endocrine disruption. And now the males can no longer fertilize the females. So we have 40,000 alligators in that lake, and that's all that's ever going to be there because all the males are basically, they're done. Endocrine disruption has destroyed their reproductive systems. So what do? We basically call our process inversion oxygenation. We want to get oxygen from the top to the bottom and into those sediments at the bottom. Because just think of it, if you have a compost pile on your property, what's the best way to get that to break down quicker? You turn it, you get air into it. So when you turn it frequently, you're getting air into it, that gets oxygen into it, that lets natural microbes break that down. We're doing the same thing, but we want to do it to the very bottom of the lake. And we're going to do it with laminar non-turbulent flow principles so that even though we're circulating a lot of water every minute, we're doing it in such a way that turbidity and suspended solids actually reduce and don't increase. So the water quality gets better, and meanwhile, we're going to maintain aerobic conditions at the bottom. Hydrogen sulfide gets eliminated, methane gets eliminated, carbon dioxide gets eliminated. So you don't have the noxious gases on the bottom that would typically build up. By doing that, then we can introduce beneficial microbes. There's natural microbes as well. We usually introduce some additional beneficial microbes to really promote the process. And those microbes will then go and start to break down all of that organic and take up the nutrients. Where do the microbes go?
What is laminar mean?
Basically laminar non-turbulent flow is we're going to take the water up and around and just gradually circulate it like that. So if it was turbulent flow, we'd go up and it would quickly circulate and we'd constantly be resuspending sediments.
This is the only thing I want to slow.
Okay, got it. Good analogy.
So what we've done is we've designed a solution to it, which includes compressors, air line, which is self-sinking, which sits on the bottom of the lake, distribution of manifolds, which takes the air and distributes it to multiple diffusers that sit on the bottom. And those diffusers are a microporous ceramic.
All right, what's your minimum safety protocols for such a line being on the bottom if you have speed boats going over the top?
As far as depth, you mean?
Correct.
You're probably, well, I guess it's based on the depth of the draw of the boat, but we've had those lines in 2 feet of water and haven't had a problem.
2 feet of water, but not a motorboat going over it.
In some cases, yeah, in some cases. Now, if you got a draw, if the prop's down 2 feet, you're probably going to whack it. And then in that case, we may have to make some adjustments. That's a thick-walled, self-sinking airline. It's a 5/8 ID 1.02 OD, so it's pretty thick. If someone hits it with a prop, it's going to get sliced, and would have to get spliced back together. So, in some cases, we don't want to have, quite frankly, we do not want to have diffusers in 2 feet of water. So,
what's your minimum safety? Back to my original question, what's your minimum safety? I'm just curious because we have some shallow ends, and I guess if this is a possibility, I just want to know what your safety parameters.
Well, I guess we'd have to look based on where the diffusers are going to lay out to see what the water depths are. Every diffuser that we've got laid out in our preliminary design is in deeper than 5 feet of water.
Okay.
So I suspect that the airlines are going to be in deeper water too. We're not taking these and pushing them up into 2 feet of water because the bubbles stay in the water such a minimal amount of time from the diffuser in 2 feet of water. So we've got these in minimal 5 feet of depth.
Okay.
There's an example of a diffuser boil on the surface. So people think, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to throw the water up in the air. What are you going to do? It's a mountain. No, it's not. Everything is underwater. There's no obstruction to boat traffic. There's no obstruction to kayakers, paddle boats, anything. That diffuser right there is in about 8 feet of water. Every diffuser that we can drop an extra foot gets exponentially more efficient. So, in 6 feet of water, that diffuser would move 120,000 gallons an hour. That boil right there is in 55 feet of water. We're moving well over 2.5 million gallons of water an hour with that diffuser. And so, when we get into design, we can do a drinking water reservoir that's 150 feet deep, the size of Lake Harmony, and we may only need 4 diffusers. You'll see our design, our preliminary design for Lake Harmony based on the current depths. I think we've got 22 diffusers in Lake Harmony. So depth is really a nice benefit, and the system will become even more efficient over time. The bioaugmentation basically revolves around the fact that when you have anaerobic conditions at the bottom of the lake, beneficial microbes, which are aerobic, have no oxygen to survive. And when you have no microbes at the bottom, that's when you start to build up that muck layer, because it's anaerobic and the microbes cannot survive. So, like I said, when we fire up aeration, natural microbes start to come back slowly into the process. And there's microbes on your grass around the lake, there's microbes in the leaves. So ultimately, natural microbes get into the lake. We do some applications of microbes initially to speed the process, to get things going quickly. So we have a PhD with 40 years of experience. We're constantly trying different blends, formulating different blends, putting them through tests. In that Lake Apopka project in Florida, that lake is so bad that the algal counts were higher than any lake I've ever seen in all my years. And we developed 5 different products just for that lake to use as test products and trials to clean up that 250 acres. Here's some of the products, just so you get a look. We've got liquid products, pellets, discs. Those discs actually have an oxygen source in, so even people around their docks could drop those discs around their docks where they've got muck. And it's a slow release, almost like an effervescence type oxygen release. So as the microbes are released, the oxygen's there as well. So those discs will in fact sit down in the muck and release oxygen, release the microbes slowly around your dock. This product right here is a product called Winter Warrior. Typically microbes love warm water. So in the case of the Lake Apopka project, you'll see a couple slides here, I'll show you in a couple minutes. But we were able to reduce 1 foot to 1.5 foot of muck in 10 months in Lake Apopka. Now, the water was warm the whole time. And so microbes perform better when the water is 55 degrees and higher. So when we work down south, muck reduction happens quite quickly. When we work up north, it happens much more slowly. So in this area right here, we would probably estimate 4 to 8 inches of muck reduction a year. And that's running the system pretty much throughout the entire season, which we would label maybe March 15th to December 1st. And obviously in the winter, you're probably going to want to shut the system down. We quite frankly run systems all year in a lot of locations, but you'll probably want to shut it down just because of liability reasons. This product right here, this Winter Warrior, is actually a cold water formula. So people that run their systems all year round will actually go ahead and dose again in November. And the cold water formula has microbes in it that can survive down to 33 degrees. So they're constantly living in that water and working on the muck throughout the winter. Here's some of the uses that we've got systems in. Retention ponds, all different kinds of ponds. Oil and gas, we've got a lot in oil and gas, whether it be freshwater ponds, whether it be flowback ponds, any type of contaminant, landfill leachate, you name it, anything in oil and gas we've got. Lakes, marinas, canals, drinking water reservoirs. I'll show you an example of one in Puerto Rico. Rivers, we've got designs for the 3 dams on the Susquehanna, the Conowingo, the Hopewood, and I forget the other one. But we've got designs for behind the dams, because behind those dams, when they dammed up the river, they basically created this big eutrophic area that's now just accumulating nutrients. And so when Irene occurred and toppled over to Conowingo, all of the nutrients from inside the Conowingo went downstream and killed all the shellfish in the upper end of the Chesapeake. And they have aerial images of all the contamination basically going down into the Chesapeake. And all the oysters were wiped out, the crabs were wiped out, the clams were wiped out. Some of the benefits: improved water quality, clarity, reduced nutrients, muck reduction, algae control, weed control, reducing pathogenic bacteria. Everybody swims in the lake or water boats and water skis and does other things. So you want to make sure that you keep your bacteria levels as low as possible. Sometimes a lot of lakes don't even think about it. They don't even test. And so a lot of times especially because of leaking septic tanks, quite frankly, we'll find coliform levels are higher than the state limits. Our process reduces pathogenic bacteria because they don't like high oxygenated water, and because we're constantly moving water to the surface, the UV from the sun knocks out the bacteria. And we can very quickly reduce bacteria levels. Did you have a question?
Just listening.
Odors, fish kills. Aeration actually improves the overall fishery. So if anybody in here fishes the lake, what you will see, and I'd say give it 2 years, but what you will see is the fish will be bigger, livelier, more vigorous in the fight, and you'll also develop a higher biomass, so you're going to have better reproduction rates. Other benefits, oxygen levels, ice prevention in some cases where it's needed. We basically have a lot of systems in organic farms. You've heard some of the problems with bacteria at, like the chipotle, for instance. That's coming from their irrigation water. They're irrigating out of ponds that are eutrophic. They have high levels of bacteria. They're putting it on the lettuces, goes into the store, it's not blocked properly, and the next thing you know, you have people developing digestive issues. So organic farms have increased the need for aeration. They want to clean the water and make sure the bacteria levels stay down. One of the things that we always talk about is increasing property values, because if you can keep the lake and not keep it, but improve the lake, reduce nuisance algae growth, reduce nuisance weed growth, that's a big deal. There are a lot of lakes in this country that have blue-green algae. And blue-green algae now is found to be a trigger for ALS and Alzheimer's. And so there's a lot of science being done now on identifying blue-green algae, and there's many forms of blue-green algae, but one of the things that our system will do is reduce blue-green algae by reducing the nutrient levels. Here's Lake Apopka, 30,800 acre lake, a pilot area of 250, tremendously high levels of blue-green, off the charts. In fact, I was almost afraid to be on the boat with the levels of blue-green that were in there. And a tremendous unconsolidated flock. At one point, 28 fish camps around the lake. Today, there's 0. So we went in, designed the system, did the whole thing. We over-designed the system for 250 acres because it was such a small area. After 4 months, we reduced blue-green by 12.5%. Reduced the sediment phosphorus, reduced the unconsolidated flock, and an estimated 300,000 cubic yards of organic muck was eliminated, and that was all done through systematic depth testing, which I'll show you. This is installation. This is what came up behind the boat, and this is what it looks like after 4 months. So all of that flock that the crop used to turn up has now been eliminated and eaten by microbes. Here's the depth testing, and this is done through a program called Bioaugmentation. So ideally what we want is we want the maps to get darker over time. So this is at the beginning, this is after 4 months. You can see how the darker is starting to move in on this thing. This blue area got longer, wider. This area right here is starting to pull down. After 10 months, this blue area pulled down just about throughout the entire area. So we've picked up anywhere from a foot and a half to up to 2 feet of additional water depth in this area in 10 months. This is another way to look at it, and this was a biovolume map. So again, we want everything to get darker over time. So the higher levels of biomass are yellow and red. And so you can see what happens over time. The biomass gets wiped out, and we start to get it back to hard bottom. So, for instance, in this case, there was 15.5% of over 80% biomass, and after 4 months, that percentage had dropped to 0.37% of biomass in those areas. That's just an aerial of the area. The lake is quite large, and we basically took an area like this and basically isolated that. Here's a drinking water reservoir. A lot of times in drinking water reservoirs, they deal with iron, manganese. raises treatment costs. It also produces a taste and odor issue at the other end. If you've ever been out of town in a hotel and you take a drink of water and you put it up to your nose and you smell and it's just foul odors, chances are that water's coming from a reservoir that they just can't deal with all the iron and manganese. The benefits with aeration is that we can flock out that iron and manganese to the bottom, and now they no longer have to treat it at the plant. So using aeration in drinking water reservoirs is highly beneficial. Typically, the payback occurs within the first year on a system in a drinking water reservoir just because of the plant savings. So this particular plant had 6 intakes, and the water can fluctuate 70, 80 feet. So what they would do is they would always pull off the top intake, and then as the water dropped, they'd pull off the next intake and off the next. They could never pull off gates 5 and 6 because the water quality was always so bad. If you think of what I said earlier, oxygen's always high at the top, always low at the bottom. If they had a gate 15 feet off the bottom in this reservoir, the water quality was so bad they couldn't open it, they couldn't use it because they couldn't treat it. They would have been putting contaminated water in people's taps. It was blue-green algae dominant with many fish kills. So we engineered a system, put in the system, established monitoring stations in 3 locations, tracked the data, remote monitoring for 4 years. So we could see the levels of contamination reducing 4 years. Basically what's happened is their treatment plant costs reduced by 25 to 35%. All 6 gates are now usable. They've got a better taste and color of drinking water. When they treat drinking water, especially with high levels of manganese and iron, you end up with disinfection byproducts. It's actually a carcinogen. And it's not uncommon in everybody's drinking water. So we were able to reduce the disinfection byproducts coming out the other end on the treated side by aeration. That's the picture of the dam. It's basically a big dammed up river coming in here, and the dam and intake are over there. There's that phosphorus. I talked about reducing phosphorus. So phosphorus at the beginning was 0.25. It basically runs now about 0.04, 0.05 on average throughout the year. That's one of the remote monitoring stations.
So it did it in 2 weeks?
Yeah, basically. December 10th to the 24th. Once that system's turned on, it drops the phosphorus pretty quick. There's the manganese and the total nitrogen at the bottom as well. These are all at the bottom. As I said, water quality is always worse at the bottom. So we want to know what's happening at the bottom. System goes on, you get the immediate drop. System goes on, you get the immediate drop.
And the next question is, it seems to be a spike for the same time in all your charts. So what causes that?
Sometimes you just can't tell. Sometimes it's a storm that comes through. A lot of times it's a natural rain event that could come through that spikes it because of all the water flows from, let's just say you got a 6-inch rain. Okay. If a 6-inch rain happened in Lake Harmony, would it show higher phosphorus than it did before the rain? Absolutely. And so that's probably the reason that kind of stuff was happening. This is a lake in Michigan. We have about, I guess, probably 50 lakes in Michigan that are probably well over 100 acres plus. This one is 500. And one of the nice things about Michigan, which you guys don't have here in Pennsylvania, is that Michigan has a taxing district. They have basically taxing rights on the property owners to do things like this. So when I was talking to Kathy and Joe, many times we'll walk into a situation like this and there's 4 or 5 groups and you got homeowners that don't want to do anything. When we go out there, if they decide they want to do it, they're going to do it because there's going to be a taxing authority that's going to basically tax all of the neighbors around the lake to do it. So in this case it was 499 acres, 30-foot max. It was dominated by hybrid milk oil that was treated and treated and treated with chemicals to the point that the milk oil said, "You're not touching us anymore." They basically grew immune to the chemicals, and they couldn't wipe it out. So they went in and totally destroyed the lake. and created a cyanobacteria algae bloom. Basically, cyanobacteria is blue-green algae. And there's a picture here I'll show you. So the lake was totally pea soup green with blue-green algae. We put 37 diffusers in this lake, 3 compressors. We saw significant reductions in milfoil. It was actually written up in the Michigan Riparian. Major reductions of organic sediment ammonia. And actually, the firm that studied this lake has now concluded that the reduction in ammonia from the aeration is one of the triggers in reducing the milfoil growth. Ammonia is a nitrogen component, and milfoil likes nitrogen. It picks up nitrogen through ammonia. And by reducing ammonia in the sediments, we're eliminating one of the food sources for the milfoil. One of the other things that they did in the same study was they analyzed how far down we could get oxygen into the sediments. So think about it, you know, you reach down, you grab some, you pull it up, it's stinky. Now you put aeration in, and the only way to eliminate the stink is to get oxygen into the sediments. So they measured 8 centimeters. They poured 8 centimeters in the sediment in 27 locations in this lake and found that the average oxygen level at 8 centimeters was 6 parts per million of oxygen, which is pretty high. It's very high, actually, for sediments. But there was 6 parts per million of oxygen. The benefit there is that the microbes now can get in there with the water and start to clean up even 6 inches or 8 centimeters down into those sediments. Here's the changes in Eurasian water milfoil as a result of aeration and bioaugmentation. So pre-aeration in 2012, there is 87, I forget what this is. This is 87 attempts. When they pull, they find Eurasian milfoil. In this one, after the system was put in, it was put in late 2012, stopped for the winter, started up in April 1st of 2013, there was still 85. However, the next 2 years, the milfoil was basically wiped out. They were able to find it in 2 spots in 2014, they were able to find it in 1 spot in 2015. Here's what it looked like before. You can see all the milfoil is topped out to the surface. That was pretty much 50+% of the lake. You couldn't get boats through it, the crops would clog up. So, as I told you, it hybridized. Chemicals weren't touching it, so they blasted. And the whole lake turned green, like that from blue-green algae. Now, if you're living on a lake and it turns green like that, and you understand the science that now what they're saying is ALS and Alzheimer's and some of these other disorders are potentially being caused from blue-green algae, that's a problem. You want to try to sell your house in a lake like that? No. You're going to take a hit. Here's the maps on Indian Lake. Again, going darker. White is all soft bottom. This is 1 year difference from May to August of 2015. You can see the white starting to turn dark. We're starting to eliminate that muck layer. Take a look at this. So here, soft bottom was 25% when we started. And after 14 months, it dropped down to 0.3%, almost a 25% reduction in that level of soft bottom. This is, I threw this in here because it's just fun. If you're into fishing and fish, I think it's fun. We did the Mount Cook Salmon Farm, which is a world-renowned sushi-grade freshwater salmon farm. And basically they had concerns about ammonia. They were feeding the fish in these pens, food would drop to the bottom, and the fish couldn't get it because the pens are suspended, and they were worried about the ammonia and the sediments from the unused fish food and the waste from the fish starting to create problems. So they asked us to design a system to deal with oxygen and ammonia. And so this one here has 2 compressors, 54 diffusers, a couple different size diffusers. And we stabilized the oxygen levels in all the rafts. and we reduced the organic solids buildup at the bottom within basically a 3-month period of time. This is some of the pictures here, where you can see the rafts basically down this canal. Just a beautiful area. Beautiful looking water, but they had a problem with ammonia. And so we had to get the ammonia out, we had to release it. So we've got diffusers out around the rafts and inside the rafts where the fish are. So you can see what it looks like. This diffuser right here is in about 15 feet of water. And it's just, like I said, just a beautiful area. One last example, a river in France, the Helpe River. We basically side streamed this river. We built a retention lake for the river and side streamed the river into the retention basin and treated the river in the retention basin. And then released the water downstream. And so that's the retention basin right there. Basically took something that was class 3 to 4, unusable for every purpose. It was just a crap hole. There was odor coming from the river, so people living along the river were complaining constantly. After we oxygenated the water, treated it, put it back through the river, we had 70 to 100% saturation. We also basically converted the class to class 1, which means usable for every purpose. The mayors of the 2 towns that were involved in bringing this project to be both received national environmental awards for bringing the technology to this river in France. The interesting thing is the water quality was maintained for 43 kilometers downstream before it degraded back to the point that they lost fish and started to have odors again. I guess I threw these in at the last minute. Just another example, fire retention ponds. They don't want algae because it clogs fire pumps. They got to draw, suppose this is protecting a hotel. Suppose they draw water out of these ponds and the fire pumps clog with algae. They don't have water to fight the fire. So in this case, there was 3 ponds side by side. At varying times, they all had algae in them. So we've got 3 or 4 diffusers in each one, basically just keeping the algae off of these ponds. We also use it for winter because they want to be able to draw the pond. They don't want the ponds to freeze. So we actually keep the systems running all winter to keep the ice off so that they have water to fight the fire. Let's just take a quick look at Lake Harmony. I've got 2 more slides and then I'm done. I can take some photos. So this is Lake Harmony. When Joe initially contacted me, we said we got to come up with some place for the compressor. So Joe said, put one at my place, and we put one here at the edge of the Split Rock property. When we design these projects, we try to find the best location centrally for the compressors because we have airline going from here to each one of these diffusers and this way, and then airline coming off this one going to these diffusers. So if we put a compressor here and a compressor all the way up here, that would maximize the amount of airline that we would use. So in the case of Joe's house, it works nice to be able to take and distribute both ways. I picked the Split Rock property just thinking that maybe they want to participate, and so we put another one down there. Those locations can change. They're not set in stone, obviously. But the thing was, through the data that Joe had provided, one of the firms that did work on the lake had a more recent bathymetric map that we used to plot the diffusers. And so there's certain areas that we try to avoid. And then, like I said, throughout this area here, I think it's all at least 5 feet of depth that we were dealing with. If I'm not mistaken, I think the deepest areas are right around in this area. This is only schematic. When we get in the field, we've got that bio-based program that we're mapping on the lake while we're on the boat. And so we're going to pick out, if this diffuser right here is in 5 feet of water and we can move it this way and get it in 8 feet of water, and we have to move it 15 feet, we're going to move it 15 feet. That's what we do during the installation to make sure that we maximize the depth of the diffusers. And here's the details of what we proposed in the preliminary design. 270.5 horsepower compressors with variable frequency drives, 12 stainless manifolds, 24 diffusers, 27,000 feet of air line for self-sinking, 480 feet of high temp, installation, 2 follow-up treatments of microbes and enzymes. There's the microbes, 250 pounds of CLEAN-FLO Plus, which are the discs, 250 gallons of Clean and Clear, which is the enzyme, and 100 pounds of nutrient sponge, which is a product that basically absorbs phosphorus and nitrogen very quickly. We have in the proposal also to do full service maintenance annually. That annually is a misnomer, really, because this service happens at least 4 times a year. We're constantly looking at it, monitoring it, and that does not include product applications that are mentioned up above. And then the other option would be to map the contour, soft bottom, vegetative conditions prior to installation, and at set intervals that you guys may want to decide to show the result. So we would do it at installation. You may want to have it done again after a year so that you can see exactly what's happening in the lake. And we would only have to go 1 time each visit to get all 3 of those maps, the contour, the soft bottom, and the vegetative. So that's pretty much it. That's who I am. There's my number, my email. Feel free to contact me with any questions. Otherwise, I'll answer any questions I can now.
As the lake cleans up, do you have to add airline?
Typically not.
No, okay.
No, typically not.
I got a couple of questions. All right, so we got 24 machines or diffusers.
Correct.
They're bought or rented?
It's all bought.
All right, so everything's bought, including the airlines and the compressors. All right, you're saying 6-inch, like you said, 4 to 8, so I'll compromise, say 6 inches of sediment possibly cleaned up for a year. Do you know what the depth of our muck is to hard bottom? In other words,
it varies throughout the lake. I don't know the specifics, but in one of those reports they do have a biovolume map that shows where the concentrations are. And from talking to Kathy, Joe, I have a friend, Miguel Pascual, who also lives on the lake. I've talked to him. So one of the things that everybody said is there's certain spots that are hard bottom, and then there's other spots that have 2 feet of muck. So it really varies throughout the lake. And that's one of the things that mapping in the beginning would show you what you're starting with, and then you could compare the mucky areas a year later.
So how do you determine success? Is it 0 muck?
Well, success can be determined a lot of different ways. Okay, so mapping is one way to identify success. The other way to identify success is you guys are using the lake every day or every weekend, and you'll be able to see a difference. So if you don't see a difference and the maps are showing no difference, then obviously it's a complete failure.
All right, and then the last question I have, is maintenance versus the process, or is it one of the same?
What do you mean by that?
All right, so we achieve success, and we have a hard bottom, our oxygen, we have a healthier lake. So now, do we continue with what we have, or is there a maintenance diet, so to speak, that we go on?
Well, if you got back to completely hard bottom throughout, you would not be dosing with microbes and enzymes. That's number one. You may decide to reduce the airflow. One of the reasons for the variable drive, it's a controller for the compressor, but we can change the motor speed with the variable drive, which saves power. And so if we cut the variable speed drive from 60 hertz to 50 hertz, you're going to save 17% power. Now, when you get to a situation where the diffusers have dropped, we've eliminated the oxygen demand by eliminating the muck. You probably don't have to operate those compressors at 100%. So then we might be able to drop them back to 50 hertz, might be able to drop them back to 40 hertz, and we'll still get the same result.
Would we have to still probably treat the lake? Because we treat it now once a year.
You treat with chemicals.
Right.
I'm going to tell you to go whole turkey on the chemicals because the chemicals kill the microbes.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends what you're treating with. Certain chemicals are worse than others. Copper actually mutates microbes.
We've been doing that for years, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's only a small portion of it.
That occur in certain parts of the lake follow the system?
Potentially. Many times lilies are rooted in muck.
Yeah.
And so, probably the biggest success we had with lily pads was Collins Lake in Scotia, New York. It's a 60-acre lake. About 70% of the lake was lily pads. And after the first season, the park superintendent called us saying, there's something happening here, and I can't explain it, and I'm getting worried. And so he shot us pictures. And what happened was the tubers, which are the long root structures of the pads, started releasing because the muck was being biodegraded. And he had these long tubers floating towards the spillway. And he didn't know what it was. He was actually concerned. He thought we were releasing the swamp monster or something. I don't know what he was. He was really concerned with it. And I told him, I said, it's a good thing, Jim. It's a good thing. Don't worry about it. And ultimately, they just pulled them out and trashed them, which eliminated them as well. Yeah.
What's the cost of this process?
I'd have to look at our proposal. And this was preliminary, just to give Joe and everybody an idea. $116,000.
That's for the installation?
That includes the installation, includes the maintenance, includes the products, includes all the equipment.
Includes the products?
Yep.
The second year, I think, is around $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 additionally. I think we told me for additional chemicals.
For products in the second year, right. So the first year, those two big applications we talked about was included. And then the second year would be much less.
I have 3 questions.
Yes.
You made mention of the liability of running it all year long. What would that liability be?
Well, in this winter, there'd probably be no liability because as I went through the lake today, there's not enough ice for anybody to get out.
I see.
So if you ran a system right now, quite frankly, that lake probably would have 10% ice on maybe, and it would probably be around the edges. The liability is if someone goes out there in a snowmobile and goes down into the hole.
So the liability is not for the system, it's for the ice.
Yeah, it's for safety.
Degrees.
So if we air it in the winter, we'll have more lake
The users will keep an open so it's a nuisance hazard.
New York, Lake George.
Okay.
The next door property at bubblers run their dock.
Okay.
Freezing.
Okay.
Second question, what's the cost of running these compressors?
I think I probably have that in the proposal too. It doesn't translate to 7.1 horsepower on the electrical conversion because these compressors run at the pressure required to offset the back pressure. So, in other words, this is an open flow system. The only back pressure on the compressor is depth of water, lengths of airlines, losses in fittings, elbows, T's, that kind of thing. So we estimated the kilowatt usage to be 4 kilowatts per hour for each compressor. Yeah, so it'd be 8 total. So if you think to determine kilowatt hours, it's 0.75 kilowatts per horsepower. So if you took 7 times 0.75, you're going to be roughly 5 plus, 5.3, 5.4, I think. Okay. So this is going to run more efficient. Now, when I talked about using the variable drives to lower the motor speed, that kilowatt hour drops. That kilowatts per hour drop as we lower the motor speed.
So in your proposal, it will show what the estimated cost will be.
It's in there, yeah. It's 4 per compressor.
And then my third question. Out of that $116,000, does that have to be paid up front, or is there some type of financing that we could run?
We've leased some systems. We could probably pull a package together for this one if that's of interest. The financing of the lease, sometimes people don't want to pay the financing. So, but we can certainly probably do it.
That's what I'm talking about, leasing, maybe pay it off over 5 years instead of...
Well, that's what we call leases. So basically, when we've done it before, we had a lease purchase basically with $1 at the end. 5 years, 5 equal payments, dollar at the end, and then it's yours. But in the meantime, in those 5 years, we have to maintain it, we own it for those 5 years until we transition.
So we don't pay the $7,000 or $8,000 a year.
The 7,000 or 8,000 a year.
Second year.
According to the product, you mean?
We would pay some.
We factor that in. I mean, if we think we're going to need products in year 2 and 3, we factor that into the total lease cost.
I think I can speak for most of the organizations that sit here tonight, is we all have limited budgets.
I realize that, yeah.
So, I don't know if we can come up with $116,000 this month, 3 months from now,
Right.
this year.
Right.
But maybe we can budget it in if you're recommending to stop the treatments. That's like close to $10,000 a year right there.
So there's probably a couple ways we can go. We do have a leasing company nationally that we work with. Their rates are a little higher. They're a little more strict with who they lease to. If any one of your organizations is a nonprofit, a 501c3, you know, they've got corporations set up, they'll probably do it. We can also figure out a way for us to do it on our end if we have to.
Pete, we spend $10,000 to treat this like a year.
Yeah.
Watershed. I mean, you know, if we could all, like, everybody get together here, we could.
That's what I'm thinking.
So, to piggyback on Pete's question, the only reason you wouldn't run the compressor in the wintertime is because of people getting on late. So if we were to delineate certain areas and mark them off to keep people away from there, would running it 12 months of that do things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So in Minnesota, for instance, they force us to shut systems down, but they allow us to keep some open water holes because they have serious fish kills. Because the bottoms run out of oxygen, and depending on how long that ice stays on there, the oxygen depletes, and the ice goes out in the winter or in the spring, and next thing you know, they have hundreds of fish living. So keeping the system running eliminates fish kills, but they limit the number of holes that we can have. So many times we can't run a complete system, and then they have certain restrictions. So you have to put signs around the lake, various spots, and you also have to put snow fencing out on the ice around the holes. So if you did something like that, you'd probably be fine. You definitely want to talk to your insurance company or anybody that insures the lake properties.
Two questions about the compressor station. How much space do you need?
Typically, we put these things into an 8x8 shed.
8x8?
A shed?
Yeah. It's just you go and find an 8x8 nice looking shed that you like, and we put the compressor in there, put the drive in there, and put the manifolds in there.
And then someone's running 24/7, the compressor allowed?
The compressor decibels on that particular one are probably something a little above a central air unit on your house. Now, obviously, it's in the shed, and
you can insulate the shed as well.
You can insulate the shed. So, in a lot of cases, these are next to a lot of people's houses on lakefronts. The other thing you can do, and this adds a little bit of cost, but it also takes the compressor off the water, is you can directionally drill a 2-inch HDPE pipe from a remote location. And we can put all the air through the HDPE pipe and put the manifold at the water. That way you can put the compressor wherever you want. Now, in this case, it might be a little hard. It might be a lot of rock, you know, so that may not be the best option.
Does the shed have a meter then? Does it not have its own meter, its own power source? You tie it in?
Typically, many times it is, unless it ties into the source from the community and it's on their meter. So I think Kathy was saying one of the spots may have a pump, a community pump or a well or something, so you might be able to just tie into that. Otherwise, a lot of times they'll just come in and drop the meter.
I'm going to take your telephone and actually install that whole system from day one to finish.
This one right here would probably take us 4 days, 5 days.
That's all?
Yeah. Probably 4 guys, 4 days, 5 days.
So let's assume that the lake neighborhood wants to keep the ice in the winter. You have a lot of people fish, okay? If you shut down the system, say, December, or when we start to actually have some ice, and then you know, open it up during break, as soon as break occurs, does it slow down dramatically? Does it slow down the reduction dramatically?
Yeah, because in that first probably winter or two, there's still a fair amount of muck that's going to use the oxygen at the bottom, and a lot of the microbes that are there probably will not make it through.
So would you suggest that, like, for 1 year, even if we did it for 1 year, go straight through on a 12-month period?
I recommend to go through it if you can, and I realize there's liability issues and other issues, so, I mean, that's something, again, I think the organizations have to consult with an attorney or something to figure out the best way to do that.
Do you ever combine this with dredging?
Shut it off.
Quite frankly, after people see the muck reduction, they don't want to do
Well, because of the edges of this lake seem to be all solid.
Well,
And runoff and
in that case, yeah, in that case, we can't help.
Or
But one of the things I'll say is that people have used this and gotten rid of the sediment, the organic sediments, and then went back and did dredging, and it was a cleaner
do you ever
operation.
see it going down to the middle of the lake? You know, once you remove the muck or reduce the muck,
The hard bottom movement?
the hard bottom on the sides drop
Probably
down.
not.
You don't think?
Probably not. I don't know what the consistency of the hard bottom is, but it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, because you have a lot of hard bottom around your end of the lake. It's really shallow.
Yeah, so that's probably
It's
not.
not muck.
We're not moving the water that quick, and we're going to.
You have all hard bottom there.
One more question for you. So all the pumps in the lake all connected by the hose, correct?
The diffusers, yeah, the diffusers are all.
Thank you for watching this presentation.